Sierra good. And if you like seafood, the lobsters, fish and will still be fine. We'll be glad to see that you enjoy your time. Have fun. Lovely sceneries we can show, historic places you'd love to go, and the weather is mainly fair with scattered showers throughout the air. And in sports we play cricket, football and tennis, softball to name a few, and people from all places enjoy our boat races. I'm sure so would you. That is why I say come to my lovely island. Have fun in the sun. Hey, come to my little paradise. If you come in once, you gon' come back twice. I tell you yes, a beach is here are good. And if you like seafood, the lobsters, fish and wills will be fine. Our people so friendly, we'll be glad to see that you enjoy your time. Hey, give it. Have fun. String band music will fill your ears, songs you'll remember for years and years. Calypso rhythm to make you dance, or slowly tempo for romance. Arts and crafts in abundance, made by our own hands. Souvenirs you must take home, and on every vacation, Anguilla you'll want to come, no matter how far you roam. That is why I say come to my lovely island. Have fun in the sun. Come to my little paradise. If you come in once, you gon' come back twice. I tell you yes, my beaches here are good. And if you like seafood, the lobsters, fish and wills will be fine. Our people so friendly, we'll be glad to see that you enjoy your time. Gimme, 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 gimme. Have fun. I say to come to my lovely island and have some fun in the sun. Come to my little paradise. If you come in once, you gon' come back twice. Our beaches here are good, and if you like seafood, the lobsters, fish and wills will be fine. Our people so friendly, we'll be glad to see that you enjoy your time. Here's a little bit of what to expect when you visit Anguilla. Have fun. The land of the sea and the sun. All right. Hey. That is why I say, come to my lovely island, have fun in the sun. Hey, come to my little paradise. If you come in once, you can come back twice. Our beaches here are good, and if you like seafood, the lobsters, fish and will still be fine. Our people so friendly, we'll be glad to see that you enjoy your time. Have fun. Lovely sceneries we can show, historic places you'd love to go, and the weather is mainly fair with scattered showers throughout the air. And in sports we play cricket, football and tennis, softball to name a few, and people from all places enjoy our boat races. I'm sure so would you.
Good night, everyone. We're going to get these proceedings started tonight. Please stand with me. We're going to have the national song and then an opening prayer.
Anguilla, nurture and keep her noble and beauteous. She fends with the sea, all land of the happy. A haven will make thee. Our life and love we give unto thee. With heart and soul we build our nation proud, strong and free. We love her, hold her dear to our hearts for eternity. Let truth and right the banner be. We'll march ever on. Let truth and right the banner be. We'll march ever on. Mighty will make her, long may she prosper. God grant her leaders wisdom and grace. May glory and honor ever attend her. Firm shall she stand throughout every age. With heart and soul we'll build our nation proud, strong and free. We love her, hold her dear to our hearts for eternity. Let truth and right the banner be. We'll march ever on. Let truth and right the banner be. We'll march ever on.
Dear God, we thank you for the blessing of life this afternoon. I pray that you would watch over this evening's proceedings. I pray for each candidate that they be able to put forward their points and their stances with clarity, dear God. And I pray for the audience that they would get more understanding and clarity to make the correct choice when the day comes. We thank you for watching over tonight. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. You may be seated. I am Kasim Ford, and I'll be moderating tonight along with parliamentarian Ronica Connor. And I would like you to join me as I introduce tonight's candidate. Tonight is the first of our island-wide political debates. And I would first ask you to welcome Brent Davis, our independent island-wide candidate. Next, please welcome Quincia Gumbs-Marie, island-wide candidate for the APM. Next, we welcome Jose Vanterpool, island-wide candidate for the AUF. And finally, Annika Webster-Lake, independent island-wide candidate. We move into the night's proceedings.
Good evening, everyone. Nominees contesting the upcoming 2020 elections will be given a chance to debate several areas of sustainable development. These debates seek to allow candidates to appeal to young voters and express their plans to achieve youth development nationally. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015, provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet, now and into the future. At its heart are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, which are an urgent call for action by all countries, developed and developing in a global partnership. They recognize that ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, and spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. The sponsors for these debates are the Government of Anguilla, Flow, Aranel, Titanium Audiovisual, Pink Mako, Ashley and Sons.
I will now go into the ground rules for tonight's debate. Firstly, each candidate will be given 3 minutes to give an opening statement, and we are aware that originally candidates might have been told 5 minutes, so you would be allowed to go up to the 5 minutes if you wish to do so. Candidates will then be given 4 questions from the ANYC on the Sustainable Development Goals. Each candidate will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to respond to the question. In this section, the candidate is only to refer to the moderator in his or her response. After candidates have been given an opportunity to respond, a maximum of 2 minutes will be given to each candidate to rebut the stance of their opponent or share further information on the question or topic if so desired. Only in this rebuttal section are candidates allowed to respectfully refer to their opponents. After the initial 4 questions, questions will be fielded from the virtual and live audience. Questions must be posed to all candidates. Questions with hidden agendas or that may seem confrontational will not be asked. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to answer each question from the audience with a minute rebuttal if so desired. If after this segment is completed, candidates will be given 3 minutes to give a closing statement. If questions are not clear, kindly ask the moderator to repeat the questions. Rules to the audience. To ensure a debate of quality, we ask the audience to be respectful of all candidates. Please place all phones on silent. The audience is not allowed to applaud or make any noise of any kind to interrupt the response of any candidate. Any audience member that insists on doing such will be asked to leave. No one is allowed to go down into the public library. And again, please be respectful. We now move into our first question. of our opening statements. I apologize. We will start with Mr. Brent Davis, and you have 3 to 5 minutes for your opening statements. You may begin now.
Okay. Good night to everyone. Just want to say thanks to the National Youth Council for organizing these very important debates, and to you, the audience, for coming out and sharing in our task to build this new Anguilla. My name is Brent Davis. I was born and raised in the village of Blowing Point. I am married for almost 20 years, and I'm a proud father of 2 princesses. I am a strong family man. My life is dedicated to the protection, empowerment, and advancement of my family and the process of nation building for this great country of Anguilla. I believe in strong and united families, which are the building blocks for a strong village and hence a strong nation as a whole. I believe in love and unity. I believe that love and unity are key universal practices that bonds all humanity. I believe in Anguillians and Anguilla, all its people, from the tip of Western to the Point and Island Harbor. I even love the goats on Dog Island and Scrub. Fellow Anguillians, my love and commitment for this country and its people is infinite. Growing up in District 6, I was involved in numerous community organizations from a tender age. I created and I led. I also followed others. Most notably, I established and led the Blowing Point Community Development Foundation, the first of its kind on Anguilla. The focus of this organization was the holistic development of the community and its people, especially the youth. We focused on information technology, homework support, guidance and counseling, community pride, and sports were key components. This foundation was the template used for the establishments of all other current community centers on this island. I believe in holistic and individual-based education that focuses on the needs and interests of each person rather than putting us all into one box. I believe that sound academics and practical and relevant technical and vocational skills are the key ingredients towards our quest to build a new and better Anguilla. A new Anguilla in which no one is left behind. A new Anguilla in which each one teaches one and uplifts each other. Fellow Anguillians, I practice what I preach. Education is key. I educated myself. I possess a bachelor's in economics and an MBA in global business. Upon completion of my studies, I returned to Anguilla in 2000 and worked as a projects and investment officer in the Ministry of Finance for 3 years. My primary focus were the responsibilities of management and supervision of government projects and other projects. I also sought and promote foreign direct investment into Anguilla, promoting and assisting local developers to invest in our country as well. I also work as Deputy Registrar of Companies at the Financial Services Department, where I traveled the world, Hong Kong, Singapore, Switzerland, seeking to improve and promote Anguilla as a player in this vital sector. During my experiences as a senior civil servant, I was blessed with numerous trainings and certificates in foreign and direct local investment, promotion, and development by the United Nations. I traveled to Singapore, to Jamaica, St. Lucia, Guyana, you name it, right? I've been blessed by you, the people of Anguilla, and I'm here to give back. I believe in strong, bold, and proactive and visionary leadership. I believe in this nation, and I believe in nation building. I believe in strategic and holistic development. Fellow Anguillians, I have one goal, that is to give back and to serve you, the people of this country. That is it. I am asking you for your vote and your support as one of the 4 island-wide candidates and one of 11 parliamentarians in the next general election. A vote for Brent Davis is a vote for Anguilla, because I hold the key to a better and brighter future for all. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Ms. Quincia Gumbs-Marie.
Good evening, Anguilla. Good evening, Anguilla. I am Quincia Gumbs-Marie, an APM island-wide candidate in this 2020 general elections. Before I delve into my introduction, I wish to thank the Anguilla National Youth Council for creating a space for myself and the other candidates to exchange ideas, to seek workable solutions for the problems we are facing and will face in this evolving world. 10 years ago, myself, along with my running mates, Ms. Deanne Kentish-Rogers, introduced the first ever district debates to explore the issues affecting Anguilla and the ideas to remedy them. I never fathomed that in 10 years I would be sitting on this stage and participating in this debate as a candidate, but it is indeed an honor to be here and to witness the heightened interest in politics, policy, and progress. Tonight, in addition to answering the questions posed to me to the best of my knowledge and information, I want to focus on the ideas I have introduced into this framework of the Anguilla Progressive Movement's governing policy and platform. The main ideas I have passionately championed since my entry into this political arena are: 1, e-governance as a means of improving accountability, transparency, processes, and effective governance; 2, governmental support for the creative economies; 3, a more inclusive and humane approach to tackling social issues, particularly transnational issues surrounding gender-based violence and youth offenders; 4, a harmonious approach to addressing socio-economic development and environmental vulnerabilities; and 5, inclusive democracy and collaborative governance. I believe in the possibilities for Anguilla without applying a limited worldview to our prospects and potential as a country. I understand the need to manage expectations, but not at the expense of the aspirations and ingenuity of the young people and the older persons in our community. I believe in rationale without curbing the enthusiasm of those who want to make more for themselves and Anguilla without having to leave our shores to accomplish it. I believe in an all-hands-on-deck approach to tackling the issues we are currently facing as a country. I truly believe that democracy should not just be a political practice. It should be a social practice, and more importantly, a moral practice with a conscious, uninterrupted understanding of societal and people issues. And that includes young people issues, women issues, the issues of the elderly, and the issues of the working class. I came here this evening as a political candidate, not to discuss politics necessarily, but to stand on the ideas, passions, and inputs that urged my candidacy. I came here not so much to debate others, as I came to stand on the policies and plans that I intend to govern with and be governed by. I pray God's guidance as I set out to do this all in the name of all I am and all I believe in. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gumbs-Marie. Next, we will hear from Mr. Jose Vanterpool.
To the moderators, my opponents, members of the Anguilla National Youth Council, my supporters, the audience both live and virtual, I bid you all a pleasant good evening. It is a pleasure to be able to join you all here this evening. I would like to thank members of the Anguilla National Youth Council, as well as the organizers and sponsors of these debates, for affording us, the candidates, the opportunity to be able to share this stage this evening. I'm not sure how others may feel, but personally, I've found these political debates to be a breath of fresh air in the midst of a very heated political cycle. With 1 week left before the polls open and close, and a decision which will affect the future of our country is made, I'm happy to see the conversation being shifted towards the issues that matter, and overjoyed to see the shift being led by our youth. I have said it time and time again. It is possible for us to improve the standard of politics in Anguilla and see the level of discourse amongst our candidates rise, But for that to happen, the youth are going to have to lead the way. This evening, I want to thank the members of the Anguilla National Youth Council for doing just that. To my opponents, and I use that term very loosely, as our loyalties should all be first to Anguilla, I look forward to a spirited evening of respectful dialogue and debate. I know it's natural for us all to come here looking to crown a debate winner and a loser, but I ask for all to remember that when conversations such as these take place, with the focus placed on issues that matter and that affect our nation, everyone leaves better educated. Everyone leaves a winner. Everyone leaves not only with a better idea of the problems that we face, but also with a new and refined solutions to fix them. This evening, I will do my best to represent the stance and plans that both myself and my party, the Anguilla United Front, bring to the table, and attempt to prove to you, the electorate, that we are the best team to move Anguilla forward following the 2020 general elections. I know my opponents will attempt to do the same, and in that spirit, I wish to wish all participants this evening the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vanterpool. Next, we will hear from Mrs. Annika Webster-Lake.
Good evening, everyone, especially to my colleagues in the political arena. Thank you to the organizers, the Anguilla National Youth Council, for facilitating these series of debates. For those physically present and those virtually present with us, thank you for your presence. I am Annika Webster-Lake, an independent at-large candidate in the 2020 general elections. I started this journey as an independent at-large candidate with the understanding that our politics, as it is not benefiting Anguilla. The divisive rhetoric and actions are dividing this country. The you against me, the us against them mentality is crippling us, and we all need to be vigilant. The Anguilla I believe in, the Anguilla we should all believe in, is one where we can have differences and still be civil. To be clear, I know we are in a political competition, but we are also in a moral crisis if we have to destroy each other to win. Anguilla needs more than any one candidate can do. We, the people, must call for a different kind of politics, just as sustainable development goals are calling for us to have a different kind of worldview. To be honest, we were talking about social, economic, and environmental sustainability on my platform long before these debates. What the SDGs are making clear, and it is also very important for all in the political arena and for every citizen and resident of this country to understand that if we do not change our thinking, we can never change our future. The Sustainable Development Goals are clear indicators that we cannot operate in silos, we cannot operate alone. The SDGs are integrated and realize the dependence of each other on the other, and the development must balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability. We must be able to understand that all of us have an obligation to leave Anguilla better than we met it, and that all of us have an obligation to do right by those who come behind us. We are obligated to lead by example in our words and by our actions. And if we refuse to accept this charge, we run the risk of losing Anguilla now and forever. The SDGs set a premise we must all follow, especially when it comes to our children and young people. In these uncertain and unstable times, simple human care is the cornerstone of what Anguilla needs, where we are so concerned about the path our island is taking that we embrace the concept of democratic participation, not being concerned about who's at the table, but really concerned about what the persons at the table bring to the table. It is necessary to face head-on the challenges in our society, be it poverty, hunger, inequality, education, environment, climate change, food security, decent work, energy, among others. We need leaders we can trust to help ensure that these are not just goals, but plans are put in place to ensure Anguilla's overall sustainability, not just for now, but for the future. We need leaders we can trust who are brave enough to stand up for what needs to be done in areas affecting our society regardless of affiliation. Anguilla needs leaders we can trust to properly represent you in your house, and you, the electorate, are the only ones who can deliver that to her. In the words of Nelson Mandela, may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. Thank you.
We'll now have our first question. Please be reminded that you have 3 minutes to respond to the question. What are 3 practical strategies that you would implement if elected to encourage sustainable financial growth? SDG 1, 8, and 11. What are 3 practical strategies that you would implement if elected to encourage sustainable financial growth? You have 1 minute to formulate your response, and then we will start with Ms. Quincia Gumbs-Marie. I will ask Mrs. Gumbs-Marie to please answer the question.
Thank you for the question. So 3 practical strategies we will utilize to encourage sustainable financial growth, which will be to offer support for startup companies, encourage the formalization of the informal economies, and support for the creative economies. Why we find it important to offer balanced support for startup companies? Because we realize that we presently have programs like Get Set, which offers financial support in the form of small loans, but we also realize in speaking to the recipients of that financial support that they need additional support to make it work. For young people, many of the research shows that in addition to financial support, mentorship is one of the most effective ways to offer efficient utilization of borrowed funds. And it is not to say that we don't have mentorship, and I understand that it already exists. However, we need to have heightened mentorship to ensure the longevity and sustainability of this business. We realize that mentorship, in addition to loan opportunities, as it was founded by the Canadian Youth Business Financial Fund, that it creates an additional $3 to every $1 spent on support for young businesses. We also realize that formalization of the informal economy is important. When we think about Sustainable Development Goal number 8, one of the most important parts of that goal is decent work. Formalization is a proxy for decent work, and it provides higher quality, better pay, and more sustainable jobs for those who benefit from it. When we think about formalization, we must understand that it means different things to different people. For the street vendor, formalization means increased public space and public space infrastructure, such as sanitation support. And for the domestic worker, it means decent living and working conditions. But the problem with formalization is that it is too expensive. which brings me to the third practical solution, which is supporting our creative economies. The UN formally adopted the year of 2021, which is next year, as the International Year of the Creative Economy, because they realized that for far too long, our artists, our musicians, our architectural designers, and those involved in arts and craft have been left in the informal economy and have been left underprotected and underserved. In Anguilla, it costs $6,000 for an artist to get a business license. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gumbs-Marie. Next, we will hear the response from Mr. Jose Vanterpool.
Thank you, moderator. 3 practical examples that I would implement if elected to help encourage sustainable financial growth. First of all, I want to focus on the fact that we're talking about practical examples and sustainable financial growth. One of the things that I feel like we need to do to encourage sustainable financial growth here in Anguilla is to grow our population. It is widely known that for a thriving economy, we need to get more people here in Anguilla. Now, the reason I want to focus on practical example is because when we have conversations regarding population growth, it tends to be a situation of the chicken versus the egg. Do we first need to create the jobs to be able to get the persons to come here as an incentive? Or do we first invite them here in an environment where we're saying that jobs are scarce for our locals? How do we protect our locals while doing that sustainably? One of the practical things that I would like to do is focus on our digital nomads around the world. These are people who are able to work from their laptops, who are not tied to a physical office or location. They could be compliance officers, they could be writers, they could be financial advisors, software developers. I feel that one thing that we could do is offer a special type of work permit which incentivizes them to be able to come to Anguilla. Now, they're coming, they already have their jobs, they can work from Anguilla, so they're not taking any jobs away from our locals, but they have the benefit of our weather, our beaches, our people, our food. There's a lot of things, the lower tax that they would have compared to the jurisdictions that they normally operate within. So focusing on getting those persons here and incentivizing them to shift their work, but still work for those foreign markets allows us to tap into bringing foreign funds over to our island. Second practical example would be diversifying our economy into the field of tech. Now, persons who would have followed my platform would hear me speak a lot about Estonia. It's what's regarded currently as the digital capital of the world. Now, Estonia started their tech revolution about 25 years ago, but along their journey, they've found that for every euro that they've invested into their technology sector, they've received a 99 times return on that investment. I feel that given Anguilla's geographic location, small size, and small population, we should be able to accelerate that growth to get to the point where Estonia is as a digital leader in a much shorter time space. And finally, since we're focusing on practical strategies to sustainable growth, we have to focus on capitalizing on the local resources which we already have to us. Whether that's the arable lands that we have, we know that it's difficult to grow some crops here in Anguilla, but there are several crops that our farmers are already able to produce sustainably. They can produce quantities that can sustain our entire population. We need to tap into that potential so that we can get them to produce more, whether that's by putting in place policy or by giving them government assistance to help on growing that industry. Same for our fishing department, for our fishing industry, where we have 200 nautical miles of space to be exploited that's currently just there sitting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vanterpool. Next, we will hear from Mrs. Webster-Lake.
Thank you. I noticed that the Sustainable Development Goals, you're referencing are 1, 8, and 11. 1 being poverty, 8, decent work, that's labor matter, and 11 being sustainable cities and communities. Financial sustainable growth can never happen if we don't build our people first. A country must have people who are properly trained, and that's my first point, properly trained persons in all, and that's a very practical strategy to happen. If people aren't properly trained, we are not going to have the sustainable financial growth we need. If they're not properly trained, they're not going to get the chance then to come out of poverty. We had a poverty assessment done in 2007, 2009, and in 2007, the poverty rate in Anguilla was 23%. In 2008, 2009, when we had that boom, we still had a poverty rate of 5.8%. And if we were to do a survey like that today, with what is going on, where you have like a couple thousand people unemployed, you're going to find that people are in poverty. So sustainable financial growth can only practically happen first if we start training our people to get them out of poverty. The second practical strategy, as it relates to decent work, if we want decent work for people, it means then that people must be able to live off of the work that is given to them, which means we cannot be talking about minimum wages. We have to be talking about living wages, because the cost of living in Anguilla is very high. And if people cannot afford to live and can't afford to go to the store, sustainable financial growth is not possible. So the second practical thing that we need to do, one, is to get people working for a living wage, a wage where they can afford to take care of themselves and they can afford to take care of their families. And then the third practical thing, which is SDG 11, where it refers to energy. And we have an energy crisis in Anguilla if we don't pay attention. Everything hinges on energy. The cost of energy in Anguilla is prohibitive. It is extremely high. And we cannot get practical, sustainable financial growth if we have to keep paying out all these heavy funds to Anglec for operation and those kind of heavy energy costs. It will take Anglec every month, this is what every year, they spend upward of $18 million buying fuel. But we have not taken any steps in the direction of making it renewable energy, where we say, listen, in order for us to really make Anguilla sustainably financial and we can have growth, we have to look at the underlying issues we have in this country. And those are the only way we can make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Webster-Lake. We'll hear now from Mr. Brent Davis in his response to this question.
This is the practical and the most important question going forward. One of the main reasons why I left working in the Ministry of Finance was this exact reason. We can sit here and discuss all kinds of fancy ideas, but the problem with Anguilla over the past 53 years, we suffer from a lack of long-term planning and strategic planning. I was trained by this country to develop such a plan. I came back in 2000 with an avalanche of knowledge and information to the people that sent me to train in terms of economic and development planning. No country can survive, can be sustainable economically without a long-term vision. When I spoke about the 50-year vision, almost 20 years ago, people laughed at me, but I understood. I came from a country in Singapore where they had a 100-year vision, and I tried to bring it down to my people for 50, and they didn't understand. Now they're getting it. We would have been 20 years ahead. How do we achieve sustainable development growth? We have to involve all our people. And it starts with involving our people at home and abroad, and not just a select few of people. The problem here in Anguilla has been that only a select few of people have been making the decisions, and none of us, including myself alone, can do that. The first thing I will implement is what I call a social and economic council. It will comprise of all of us here in this room, some abroad as well, utilizing the talents and skills of all our people so that we can put ideas together to move this country forward. In this economic plan, we must educate and develop our people. We have 200 miles of economic fishing zone. One of the first things that we can do immediately is the implementation of deep-sea fishing licenses from the 100-mile to the 200-mile area. Most of us, none of us, going to go that far. We still have from 1 to 100 miles for ourselves. This holds tremendous economic potential, in that we can sell four fishing licenses at $5 million. Just assume it's 5 million EC, but I know it's going to be 5 million US. That's $20 million that we have instantly. And we can do away with prohibitive taxes like the levy and all of those type of things. I have in my hand a full document of various economic issues that we can do. Secondly, we have to reduce and simplify our custom duties, right? My proposal is to initiate a flat tax of 20%. It makes everything easier. It reduces the stress and it reduces all the red tape. You know what you're spending. You spend $100, you know it's 20%, that's $20. And it will not provide the stress that will come from the GST that is coming, right? So these are just two simple practical things that we must do now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. You will now have 2 minutes to rebut the stance of your opponents or share further information. And once again, we will start with Mrs. Quincia Gumbs-Marie. You can go ahead.
I want to just add further information to my last point that I was not able to complete. With the rise of the low-touch economy due to COVID-19, we also have to realize that practical strategies must also take into consideration the constraints of our already restricted economy due to COVID-19. And the creative economy addresses just that. Because of how it presents information, we realize that it was how it utilizes information, we realized that it was a creative economy that kept going while our economy was shut down. We saw the importance of persons like Pink Mako and G. Fleming from Titanium Songs, Fidelia Richardson, Chad Kent, Clemvio Hodge, who entertained us and kept us in the loop while we were shut down and far from each other. The creative economy has a certain level of sustainability, which is important, but also a certain level of protection that allows us to continue to grow without being affected by certain externalities such as storms and pandemics. In 2012, Britain invested in its creative industry through a Creative Britain scheme, and it was able to raise $15 million. Its economy was able to gain $15 million from the growth of that industry. So we propose working with local musicians to encourage publishing, encourage formalization, and deviate from the bottom-up approach by ensuring that we incorporate young Anguillians, young creative persons in the formalization of the creative economy and policies to govern that sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll next hear from Mr. Vanterpool for a rebuttal or further information.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It was mentioned that something that would be needed to ensure this sustainable financial growth would be mentorship, and I do agree. But we can only teach what we know and what we've been exposed to. So for it to be a practical example, I would first have to see where are we going to get this expertise from, especially when we're talking about diversifying into new fields such as the tech space, etc., where we do have some persons who are experienced, but they may not be as well versed into the new fields that we're going. When I mentioned earlier that program of growing our population by focusing on inviting digital nomads here to our island, one of the things that I would like to see incorporated with that is a buy-in from those same digital nomads who are coming here, where they agree that at several points in time a year, they will attend a job fair where we can expose our youth to the potential jobs that are out there that are non-traditional in our community. Along with this, I would like to see a mentorship program with these same digital nomads, because these are the people within the field that we're looking to explore. They already work for the companies, they already have the networks and the opportunities. They will be able to pass on to our youth the expertise that they have. So that in that plan of growing our population, it also comes with increasing our mentorship. Living wages was something that was also mentioned, and I do agree we need to get a living wage here in Anguilla. We often hear talk about the need for a minimum wage, and I'm happy that the Honorable Ms. Cora Richardson Hodge has already started the work with the Labor Relations Act, and I know that once elected, she will finish the work that she started in implementing that minimum wage. But the point that I want to make is diversifying into the tech space. when I was in university, my first job that I got was when I was in second year, and I was working from at home in my university dorm for 10 pounds and then eventually 15 pounds an hour. By the end of my third year, when I started working up for a startup, I was working again remotely for home for 35 pounds an hour. The jobs that, the pay that's in these fields that we wish to explore and we want to get our children exposed to will do wonders in terms of alleviating them from poverty by providing a more than substantive living wage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now hear from Mrs. Webster-Lake.
The ideas I'm hearing are really fantastic ideas, but the bedrock of any society is its people. The greatest resource in any country is its people. And if we are not people-focused, if we don't start with the people, then nothing else matters. If people don't have spending power, economic power, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters at all. I also heard one of my learned colleagues speak of the 200 nautical miles, that exclusive economic zone that we're speaking about. And I just wanted to point out very quickly that lots of the countries around here, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua, they all have an exclusive economic zone as well. And they have sold out their exclusive economic zone to the Japanese whaling company. So what is happening with that is that Japanese are fishing those waters. And that deep sea fishing, where they look at pelagics, which is the fish that swim at the top, and those would be your tuna, those other big fish, the mahi-mahi, those fish, they migrate only past Anguilla twice a year. So we are not sure if they're being overfished because of how the other territories have sold out. So there must be proper assessment done before we can say, well, that's something that's viable. There must be an assessment done. They must have people coming in, checking to see, well, if it's a viable option for us to handle. Yes, we do have the economic exclusive zone, which we should use if it's viable, but only if it's viable. Thank you.
Next, I'll hear from Mr. Davis.
Okay. Yes, in terms of the fishing zone, those things have already been, the files that they're catching dust in the Ministry of Finance for 20 years. So it's nothing new. We all talk about it, every politician talk about it. We need to do the fishing. Two simple other ways that we can immediately reduce government spending. One simple thing, it sounds simple. My proposal is to have one vehicle. We're going to buy a nice Lexus or Mercedes for our premier, and none of us, because we have to buy our own cars, right? We're going to get duty-free concession and a travel allowance. You will be amazed to see that simple thing. We can save millions of dollars. If we want to destroy our own vehicles, so well be it. Public Works won't have to fix it, etc. Another thing we can do immediately. All these things I'm talking are things we can do to help ourselves, right? We can sit at the government with the National Commercial Bank of Anguilla and encourage them to provide incentives to supply 20 homes. Just imagine 20 young Anguillians who work with stable jobs in government and the banks. That's all we need, 20, right? Producing homes at affordable rates. That will translate into millions of dollars to stimulate our economy right now without one tourist. Secondly, all we need is to attract and utilize our COVID-free status and get 5 to 10 investors or foreign persons to build 5 or 6 homes. That will generate so much money for us that we don't need a tourist yet. Because at the end of the day, for the next 6 months, tourism, we have to act as if it's not there, right? So we need practical and real solutions. Second, the third thing, we need to increase average visitor expenditure when the tourists come back. So we have to create things in our communities. We have to develop our communities in the valley. We need to develop the agricultural and botanical gardens. We need to develop the Kenneth Harrigan Avenue in Island Harbor and the Hubert Hughes Botanical Gardens in Blowing Point, etc., so that our tourists will have things to buy. Thank you.
Mr. Davis. Thank you.
Thank you to all of the candidates for your responses. We will now move on to the second question. Please be reminded that you have 1 minute to formulate your answer and 3 minutes to respond to the question. Question number 2. Youth in Anguilla, meaning persons aged 13 to 35, account for the largest unemployed sector nationally. What are some practical ways of improving this dilemma? SDG 1, 9, and 11. I will now repeat the question. Youth in Anguilla, meaning persons ages 13 to 35, account for the largest unemployed sector nationally. What are some practical ways of improving this dilemma? SDG 1, 9, and 11. We will begin with Mr. Jose Vanterpool. You have 1 minute to prepare.
Thank you, moderators. So to put it simply, we're trying to figure out how do we address the issue of unemployment to our youth. At the moment, we have a system where our youth currently leave school and the opportunities they have to explore are quite limited. With tourism being the main focus of our economy, every year we have school leavers who go through fifth form, go through sixth form, but they have nothing but the tourism industry to be able to explore for opportunity. The issue with our tourism industry is that it's at a fixed size. Even though we have more and more persons to pump into it each year, it's not growing at the same rate. We have persons who would have been involved in that industry for years. So one thing that we have to do is to create new spaces for our youth to be able to explore. And again, I go back to the field of tech, but I feel like I've explored that a bit in the last statement. But I feel like creating opportunities where, again, we empower them to become these digital nomads that we will be trying to attract to grow our population is one way that we can address the problem of unemployment. In order to do so, however, we need to equip them with the tools and the training to be able to do so. So something that will be key to addressing this issue of unemployment, which is directly linked to the issue of poverty, is that of education and training. I would like to see a formal overhaul of our entire educational policy done, because I feel that even though our education system has served us well to get to the point where we are today, it is not enough to be able to equip our students with the tools and skills that they need to be able to not only survive but thrive in today's growing digital economy. I feel that we need to educate our youth as to the importance and the possibilities of the opportunities that exist within our local agricultural and fishing industries. I feel that until now, these are sectors that have been somewhat looked down upon, sectors that have been somewhat underdeveloped, and sectors that we have not placed enough emphasis in terms of educating our youth to the importance, and not only that, the possibilities that exist within these spaces. But again, we're going to have to equip them with the tools to do so, whether that's training, whether that's implementing policies so that they can go and do internships with companies or within that field, whether that's exposing them to techniques that's being done in places such as Israel, etc., where like Anguilla, they have dry land and lack of arable land, but they're finding new and innovative ways to be able to capitalize that and explore new industries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vanterpool. We will now hear the response from Ms. Annika Webster-Lake.
Thank you. I noticed that it says persons age 13 to 35. The Education Act, though, goes up to 17. So if you're not 17, you should not really be in the workplace. So I'm going to go from that, but here's my practical way. Training, training, training. And I'm going to look at the education system in this, and I want to talk about how our education system has been, by and far, largely focused on academics. We have sidelined as an educator, I still consider myself a teacher. We have sidelined an entire cross-section of our young people because they are not academic. We've taken education, we've placed it in an academic box, and we expect everybody to learn from that one box. We banded children, band 1, band 2, band 3, band 4, and we've literally said to the children in bands 3 and 4, you're not good enough. But we're doing it anyway to just make sure you can get through a system. We have children who leave school and they are not functionally literate, but every year they're promoted. Something is fundamentally wrong with that. And that is why we have an unemployment issue, because we make people, the young people, feel as if they are not valued. It is time for us to understand that just like we diversify an economy, we need to diversify education and stop just throwing something out there for the young people and saying, oh, we're going to teach you a little skill. No, let's have a full-on skilled program for children who are not academic. Not everybody learns the same way. And if we want a dynamic education system, then what we must do is present a dynamic education program to the young people of this country where they don't feel left behind, where they believe that we believe in them and we are fighting for them by giving them something to hold on to. So training, and that is the only way we're going to deal with this dilemma. Training children, teaching them how they learn, not by giving them an academic calendar or saying, you got to get through this curriculum. And I myself am guilty of preaching curriculum when I know the child wasn't capable, because that's what we were taught to do. And when you realize the end results, it's disheartening. And children leave our classrooms every year ill-equipped for any workplace because we have failed to train them the way they need to be trained. Training, training, training.
Thank you, Ms. Webster-Lake. We will now hear the response from Mr. Brent Davis.
Response?
Would you like me to repeat?
No, I didn't.
Repeat
I
the
didn't make a
question?
statement yet. It started with her.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
All right. Okay, I agree with Miss Webster. The key has to be education and education, right? That's the foundation of any nation. I believe in individual-based education, not putting all of us in a box, as I said in my opening statement. That is where we went wrong. I am an economist by nature, but I am also very versed in construction. I am versed in plumbing. I am versed in just about everything except electrical, right? I'm even scared of putting a light bulb. But I'm saying that to say this, that we have to create well-rounded individuals, that when we lose an opportunity in one aspect of our lives, we can adapt, right? I went to St. Martin, I went to the States, I cut hair in college, right? I had ladies with nice haircuts and I had gentlemen to cut their hair, just to say that we have to create individual citizens that are versatile. We also have to work with our financial institutions, as I said earlier, to create opportunities for young people in business to start up small businesses and provide the institutional support and policy and protection policies to promote our young entrepreneurs. It's very important that we protect our young business persons, because this is the key into sustainable development and to preventing a collapsed economy like we have today, where we are subject to hurricanes, COVID, and these type of things. We must build resilience, but it must be based upon our people. We have the ability, and we just need a government in place and people there that who care and to implement all the great strategies that all of us are talking about. It comes down to caring. Our people are ready. Let's go.
Thank you, Mr. Brent Davis. We will now hear the response for question number 2 by Mrs. Quincia Gumbs-Marie.
Thank you. At risk of sounding like I'm repeating everything I was said before, education is a key part of addressing unemployment in young persons. Education enables upward mobility in young persons, and that's everybody else, to be honest. and it ensures that we are escaping poverty, because a part of this question also touches on sustainable goal number 1, which talks about poverty. And education and family planning are key ways to escape poverty. But what I can say about our education system is that we have a comprehensive system in conception, but we don't have it in practice. What we have really is an opportunity for every person to move through the system, to be exposed to different forms of topics and classes. However, we do not have an opportunity for young persons to have a multidisciplinary approach to learning and development. In order to tackle unemployment, we have to ensure that our education system is meeting the labor market needs. It doesn't make sense to produce persons for a labor market that no longer exists. We can't only keep producing persons for producing lawyers and doctors when we don't have the environment to sustain that alone. And this is not me attacking lawyers or doctors, but I'm saying that we need a wider approach to our educational system. We also need to ensure that young individuals are aware through their process that in their decision making, when they make that decision in third form, that they can still become things other than what they choose at that point. When I was in my final year of university, I realized that I did not like hospitality. But what I got the opportunity to do in speaking with my guidance counselors is to major in my policy courses. So although I graduated with a bachelor's in hospitality, my expertise was in policy. So we need to ensure that young persons can move and feel like the education system is not a static one that keeps them stuck into one place. And also, we need to have a balanced approach to how we deal with our labor affairs. There are 200 young persons leaving the high school every year, and we have about 4,000 work permits renewed. And if they are unemployed, we need to ensure that the renewal of the work permits are actually essential workers, because we cannot put the collection of monies in front of the provision of jobs. And we also have to balance our approach to population growth, because yes, work permits also go hand in hand with population growth, but we also need to ensure that the young Anguillians leaving high school have opportunities to enter the workforce. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the candidates for your responses. You will now have 2 minutes to rebut or add further information.
Thank you, moderator. I want to use my extra time. Well, I intended only to singly add one point that I omitted earlier because I was afraid of running over, but I just want to make one clarification. With the mention of 4,000 work permits renewed, I just wanted a clarification as to, is that every single year or is that over the course of the past 5 years? Because it's relevant in terms of painting the picture. The one thing that I would like to add is that when we revisit our education system, our educational policy, one thing that we're going to have to make a concerted effort in doing is promoting or equipping our students with the skills to be able to create their own businesses. This means it's going to be essential that throughout our educational system, both primary and secondary, we expose them to what it entails to start a business, and we start probing them and equipping them with tools to start thinking about what business they may want to get into and helping them to be able to explore this space. What we're going to have to do as well is look at alternative avenues for providing funding, because they may leave school with a business idea, but it's one thing to have the idea and it's one thing to have the capital and resources to be able to realize it. One thing that I think we could do is focus on introducing seed funding and equity funding. There are plenty of new approaches within this space. It's no longer the traditional space where you find an angel investor who has to be a billionaire who on his own has to determine whether he gives you $10,000, $100,000, or even $5,000. I was privileged to meet the founder of a company called Funderbeam, and we all know that there's a new approach to funding called crowdsourcing, where persons who believe in the cause or believe in the business on an individual basis can contribute to providing the funds necessary to see that business through. But what Funderbeam does is, interestingly, applies a crowdfunding approach to in angel investment. So you may have a pool of 3,000 investors who may have billions of resources among them. But you just need a single investor in that pool to buy into the idea, and then they can reach into the pool of investors and then network on your behalf to say, okay, I believe in this idea. I've pledged $10,000 towards it. How many other persons are willing to contribute? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vanterpool. We will now hear from Ms. Annika Webster-Lake, who has 2 minutes to refute or to add further information.
Well, I'm very happy to hear that my colleagues agree with me that it all starts with education, that we're on the same footing. That's very, very important. But I wanted to use an example. I remember years ago when I first started teaching, TVET used to call PVP, pre-vocational preparation. And I remember one of my students came and they said, "Teacher, I can't go on PVP. That means poor, very poor." That was their take on PVP. A very negative connotation, a very negative connotation. But the students who were in that class were the ones who came and they built our houses, they built our cabinets, they built our walls, they were doing all of that work for us. And it's time for us to give them their place in society, in education. We give them their rightful place by giving them the opportunity to learn their trade, by providing that opportunity. Stop insisting they take a science. Stop insisting they take something that they really can't do. It all will really start with training. And if we train them and give them the requisite skills they need, we're going to have a society, an economy that's going to be financially sustainable. Because we have people here who are able to work, who are able to make a living. They won't be sitting on the streets. They won't be there act like I don't have anything. They won't be begging. But it has to start with education. And I'm really happy that we're all on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Webster-Lake. We will now hear from Mr. Brent Davis, who has 2 minutes to refute or to add further information.
Yes, I would like to add a strong focus on apprenticeship programs. We need to really implement the apprenticeship programs within our whole society. Too often, people come from away and they sit in a job for 10, 15 years without really training our people. We have these things in the law. We need to enforce them and to make sure that our people are given opportunity, equal opportunity to empower themselves in the hotel sector, for example, which is our main sector, right? Where we have that problem where our people have to train these people. You know, they may have a paper from somewhere, who knows if it's real or not, because I doubt if we check, right? Real talk now. And they make all the money, and our people train them, right? And we go home with nothing. So we have to ensure and enforce that these things are in place. We also need to diversify our education system in terms of attracting a hospitality training school. These things are done, these ideas have been here for 20 years. And it's very disheartening to see that we keep saying the same things. Cinnamon Reef was designed for that. It's still there with the goats in it. We have to attract, one of the things that I want to do, what I want to promote, is to look at our history and our culture. We are air people and sea people. Our ancestors, who some of them could have hardly read, traverse and control the air and the sea. And we here with all our education and so-called intelligence are here begging British people for money, right? I'm not happy with that after 53 years, right? I'm into nation building, I'm not into politics, right? So we need to attract an aviation school and a maritime school so we can produce pilots, captains, and all necessities of this industry so that Royal Caribbean or American Airlines can come to Anguilla and have a whole host of people. That's what we have to do. We have to build this nation. We have the capability. We are doing it indirectly. We have over 60 young men, some of the young men who supposedly were the rejects, that are captains now in the ferryboat industry, just for example. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Davis. We will now hear the response from Mrs. Quincia Gumbs-Marie, and I'd like to remind you that you have 2 minutes to rebut or to add further information.
I just want to begin by reminding my learned colleague that it matters not if it is 4,000 persons a year or 4,000 persons over 5 years, because we still have 200 persons a year leaving school, and in 5 years, we will have 1,000 persons a year leaving school, and those persons and their needs are still unaddressed, and that employment rate still exists. And it's not only, that's only school leavers. That doesn't include up to the persons to the ages of 35. We have to keep our fingers on the pulse to ensure that our young Anguillians are not slipping through the cracks. And it's not a matter of how I say it. The fact is that it exists. We also have to improve our capacity building to ensure that our young persons are fit to purpose. I know I mentioned it earlier, but I wanted to elaborate. One of the problems we have with moving towards renewable energy throughout the region is that our human resource is not familiar with the needs of renewable energies. So you can go around, you can find any person who can fix a generator, but you cannot find very easily a person who can fix a renewable energy system. And because we want to move to that, we have to encourage young persons to prepare for the economy that we want to create. That economy includes the fishing and agricultural development. So we also then have to respect those persons who already exist in both of the industries, in fishing and agriculture. So we also need to have greater investment in agriculture and improve the way we respond to it to make it more profitable to attract young persons so they can have diverse means and opportunities for job creation. Thank you.
Thank you to all of the candidates for your responses. We will now move on to our third question. Please be reminded that you have 1 minute to formulate your response and 3 minutes to respond to the question. The question is, currently, there are only 8 female inmates in our prison, all immigration-related issues. What do you see as the reason for the high level of incarceration of our young men, and how can this be enhanced? SDG 4, 8, 10, and 11. I repeat, currently, there are only 8 female inmates in our prison, all immigration-related issues. What do you see as the reason for the high level of incarceration of our young men, and how can this be enhanced? SDG 4, 8, 10, and 11. We will begin with Ms. Annika Webster-Lake whenever you are ready, within a minute. I would like to clarify. There was a mistake, so it should be, what do you see as the reason for the high level of incarceration of our young men, and how can this be reduced?
No, the last word should be reduced.
The time is up. We will now begin with Ms. Annika Webster-Lake, and I'd like to remind you that you have 3 minutes to respond to the question.
That's an interesting question. The SDGs they're referring to, 4, that's quality education, 8, decent work and economic growth, 10 and 11, reduced inequality, and 11, sustainability in our cities and our communities. For years, and I remember as in high school, one year, it could have been 1995, 1994, there was this debate topic about the marginalization of men in the Caribbean, of boys and men in the Caribbean. And we were on the other side and said men are not marginalized. But when we heard the opponents speak, we realized that we had a problem with young men being marginalized in our society. One, they are the ones who fill up lots of our bands 3 and 4s. They fill them up. They're the ones that are there. Because one, we don't present an opportunity for them. A child learns what they live. If you tell a child that they're good enough long enough, they're going to believe they're good enough long enough. If you tell a child you're a dunce long enough, they're going to believe they're a dunce if you say it long enough. So we do have marginalization of our young male population. They are marginalized. They wear their clothes big, so we call them gangsters. They have no value. They plait their hair, so we figure, oh, you can't be any good because you plait your hair. But how you wear your clothes or how you plait your hair, does that change the quality of your character? Does it change who you are as a person? So we do that to them. A second issue when it comes to finding decent work, because of how the perception of how they look is also an issue. They look funny, so we're like, oh, but you can't have him working for you. Again, that is discrimination. But then we have another reason why there's a high level of incarceration of our young men. And maybe this is the big elephant in the room. A lot of our young men are there because of marijuana. That's why they are imprisoned. And we as a nation need to stop playing games with the issue of marijuana. And every election cycle, politicians tout it around and they talk about it. It's time to put it on the ballot and let the people of this country decide what they're going to do about it, because that is real participatory democracy. And if we are touting democracy and we want people to participate in it, then let's get it on the ballot for the people to vote for what they want. Because if we are just saying, if you have marijuana and you're imprisoned, if that's what you have and you're in prison, then should we not be paying attention to what that's doing to our young men? Is it an offense? No, based on the law, it's illegal. But we have politicians talking about it all of the time. Everyone is touting, what is that phrase now? The weed must be freed. That's the statement. That's the statement they're using. But put it on the ballot. Let democracy work. Put it on the ballot. So we don't have that issue. We can reduce our young men in prison.
Thank you. We will now hear the response from Mr. Vanterpool, and I'll read the question from Mr. Davis, sorry, and I'll read the question over. Currently, there are only 8 female inmates in our prison, all immigration-related issues. What do you see as the reason for the high level of incarceration of our young men, and how can this be reduced? SDG 4, 8, 10, and 11. You have 3 minutes.
Very important and very touching question. First of all, I think the main reason for the incarceration of our men and boys stems from the home. It starts at the home. It does not start with marijuana. Marijuana and other drugs are side effects, because when these young boys are in homes for lack of fathers, especially when they're in homes where stepfathers and other people abuse their little sisters, their moms, etc. As a man and as a young boy, there's tremendous pressure on this country that we are not addressing. Imagine you're a young boy, 16 years, and you're supposed to be the man of the house. You know, I speak in real terms. And your mom has 2 or 3 daughters and other young, and maybe sons. And they're being abused by the new boyfriend. Right? You're supposed to be the protector of your mom and your little sisters. You talk to your mom about issues. You're ignored. You're being called rude. Then what you do, you find comfort on the gangs under the trees. We have a psychologist in the room. These are the issues that lead to other things. And you stay away from your home because you feel the love on the street. And the drugs, whether it's marijuana or other things, that's a side effect of the home, the lack of the fathers in the home, and the whole societal norms that we have today. Another issue which stems from is the failed education system. I remember when they transitioned from the high school into the comprehensive education, a lot of the young men that we see today as so-called rude boys, they took going over from third farm when they had to go into the academics. They did not have that academic background, and there was nothing for them to do, and they dropped out school in third farm. And you see, those are the young men today that we are calling the rude boys, are the failures. They just need love. They just need attention. And that is why we need to focus on the community college so that we can bring back these skills and technical training. We need to give them training and skills in the prisons. They are artists. They are musicians. They are plumbers. We need to focus on them and not see them as rejects, right? And that is the way we build our society. So it's not a matter of drugs. It's a matter of the family, the breakdown of the family in the 80s, especially when the mom had to work 2-3 jobs. These problems that we have today started over 20 years ago, and they're not easy solutions, but we need to address them, as I keep saying, in a holistic, in a long-term fashion, right? They're not problems that started yesterday. They started way back. So we need to look at it in a holistic manner. Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Davis. We will now hear from Mrs. Quincia Gumbs-Marie.
In a 2019 report written by the Gender Affairs Unit in Anguilla by our very own Dr. Rania Foy-Connor, she identified that there are currently no measures and no published data to understand the gender perspective in Anguilla, no known developed instruments to measure gender equality, and the unit is never consulted on issues involving transnational issues, including organized crime and drugs for Anguilla. What we realize here is the high level of incarceration of our young men is as a direct result of our abandonment of our gender affairs unit, because we need to incorporate them in how we deal with gender problems in Anguilla. And because of that, we have a legal system that over-criminalizes our young men. So a young man can make a mistake at 18 or use a spliff at 18, and that goes on his criminal record for the rest of his life. And even if he goes on to change his life, he cannot go on to school. He cannot get certain opportunities because he has a criminal record and he's denied of opportunities to advance himself. And then that further feeds into the problems of poverty and hunger and other related social problems. For the decriminalization of marijuana, it disproportionately addresses young men and it puts them out of society. So even when they leave for their 2-year sentence, when they come back, they are ostracized from the working community, and persons would look at their records and deny them of opportunities. Even our juvenile delinquent young men are treated like young criminals, and instead of utilizing alternative dispute resolutions, they are given a hard taste of jail at a very early time. So there are a number of things that we can do, but one of the things that most gender affairs units recommend to reduce the level of incarceration amongst our young men is to increase restorative and rehabilitative efforts in our legal system to ensure that we actually solve the problems affecting them and not leave them on the fringes of society. Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Mrs. Quincia Gumbs-Marie. We will now hear from Mr. Jose Vanterpool.
Thank you, moderator. What are the reasons for the high level of incarceration among our young men, and how can the level be reduced? First of all, I agree with all of my fellow colleagues that too many of our young men are sitting in jail over a spliff or a plant. I think it's about time that we have gotten to a point in the world where we've known the things that we used to think were true about marijuana to be false, and we need to not only talk about the issue of decriminalization, but put it to action. I plan on championing this effort once elected so that this is no longer a conversation about decriminalization, but we move to some action for our young men. With this, we need to also wipe the records going forward of all nonviolent marijuana-related crimes so that this is not something that haunts them. This brings me to my second point. persons who are charged for an offense are currently punished rather than incentivized for their criminal records which follow them. Reason being, if you have an indiscretion that you made when you're in high school, you're a teenager, that is added to your record, but 20, 30 years down the line when you have since corrected your mistakes, you're still punished because you can't travel to, say, for example, the US without that record following you. You can't apply for a job here without that following you. So even though we're saying that we want them to be productive citizens in society, we're hindering them with this tainted record. One of the practical things that I think we need to do is enact legislation, whereas minor offenses, you're incentivized to stay on the straight and narrow, where, say, for example, after 5 years of good behavior, any minor offenses would be, from that period ago, would be removed from your record. This allows you to move forward freely without that record following you. It incentivizes you to stay on the straight and narrow because it's not automatic. You will have to be an exemplary citizen and not fall back into recidivism over that 5 years, or else the time will restart. One of the things I think we also need to do is ensure that there are programs in place that ensure the development of our young men once incarcerated. We need to recognize that the purpose of incarceration is supposed to be for rehabilitation. If these young men are just sitting down in our jails without programs in place to educate them, to develop them, to give them a trade or make them a productive member of our society once released, then essentially we're just having them sitting down there and wasting their lives away, which I think is very wrong. We need to focus on ensuring that we have a social programs in place to ensure that the young men who are serving their time come out better than they went in. Finally, I feel like we need to do some research and get to the bottom of what are the real reasons behind why our young men are being incarcerated. Marijuana aside, what are the trends that we need to identify behind them being led to this path that leads to them sitting down in prison? Once we get that data, we need to analyze it, find what the root causes are, and address the root causes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the candidates for your responses. You will now have 2 minutes to rebut or to add further information. We'll begin with Ms. Annika Webster-Lake.
My colleague, Mr. Vanterpool, mentioned the first thing that I was going to say. His last point was the first thing. I think what we do in our society, we treat symptoms and we don't go to the root cause. But there's a root cause why these things are happening. I heard my other colleague, Mr. Davis, mentioning that people come from broken homes. You know, they have heavy stuff they're dealing with. Those things are true. But I am going to dare say it's a combination. It's a combination of, it could be a combination of home, and it's also in conjunction with this schooling system. And if we look, and every teacher who's listening, or every teacher in this room would tell you, there are some boys who will always be sitting on the block. They're not going to school. They'll be down on the park. They're not in class because they feel as if there is nothing there for them. Again, what kind of education system do we have where we have children feeling there's nothing there for them? And we need to pay attention to that. We have to pay attention to it. Yes, you can come from a broken home, but lots of people come from broken homes and they break the cycle and they go to school and they find a teacher who can mentor them and a teacher who helps them rise above the difficulties and make them believe that they can, and they do. So if we have our young men then, the cause being that we don't provide a place for them to learn, a place for them to feel worthy, a place for them to have value, then the streets will love them more than anywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Webster-Lake. We will now move on to Mr. Jose Vanterpool, and I'd like to We'll now move on to Mr. Brent Davis, and I would like to remind you that you have 2 minutes to rebut or to add further information.
Okay, thank you. This is a serious issue that we have to address, right? Like I said, we are saying the solutions are not simple. But I just want to add, I think in our quest for, I think Quincy mentioned it, the whole aspect of gender equality over the years, right? The focus was mainly on women and girls. And I think we kind of got lost by looking at that, and our young men especially got left behind in that you find as a man, you in high school, we have so much more pressures, right? Even in terms of the whole aspect of relationships in terms of females. The females gravitate towards the guys who are more aggressive and who display the bad qualities that 20 years and 15 years later that they shun upon, but in high school, they go for that. So hence we see that the young men develop those problems in the ages of 18 to 25. And as men, in a joking kind of way, we grab whatever the women want, we go towards. This is not an excuse, but this is a reality of what part of the problem that we need to address. So I think the focus over the past 50 years, not just in Anguilla, around the world, because this is a global problem, on women advancement and girls upliftment, we forgot the young men and the men. And we find that our men, because men have an ego and a macho kind of mentality, they're afraid to go back to school after they reach 18, and a whole host of other kind of, what I would term egotistical issues, right? But that must be addressed. And I think the role of the woman now, and women in particular, we need to focus on men, right? Because we need that help, and it's the only way going forward, because we need both our men and our women to build this nation.
Thank you. We will now hear from Mrs. Quincia Gumbs-Marie.
Thank you. To respond to what my colleague, Mr. Brent Davis, said, that marijuana is a side effect of young men especially, being abused. I also want to talk about the importance of not just only involving the Gender Affairs Unit, but also involving the Ministry of Social Development. Because part of the APM's platform as it relates to decriminalization is actually properly addressing our issue of substance abuse. Because in Anguilla, I think we sometimes become a bit afraid to deal with the dark side of who we are and the dark side of the things that affect us. It is not only marijuana that's in circulation, but there are other stronger drugs that exist. And when we examine that, we have to reimagine what success looks like to us. We need to ensure that we have proper social safety nets to catch our young persons, especially our young men with where the family structure fails them. And one of those social safety nets that we must have is a proper mental health program and a rehab program. So not just to rehabilitate bad behavior, but to rehab persons from over-reliance and addiction to drugs, and a mental health program that helps them to deal with the pressures that redirect them to drugs and alcohol and other forms of abuse. Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Ms. Quincia Gumbs-Marie. We will now hear from Mr. Jose Vanterpool.
Thank you, moderator. Now, there's a lot I have to say on this topic, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. I agree with my colleague that legalization being decided upon via the ballot may be a viable option to deciding whether Anguilla should explore legalization or not, because I acknowledge that this is a discussion that we're divided upon, and we need to ensure that we make decisions based on the majority of our community. But I do not think that we wait until decriminalization is seen on our ballot box. The reason being, legalization should be on our ballot box this year. We have too long let that opportunity slide, and I feel that since we all agree on decriminalization, regardless of our stance on legalization for or against, we need to acknowledge that that decriminalization needs to happen now for the benefit of our young men. Now, the assertion was made that marijuana use is associated with abuse in broken homes, which is to me, it's in a very outdated way of thinking. I reject this notion outright. I feel at this time we stop demonizing marijuana because, to put it simply, correlation is not the same as causation. For example, broken homes and abuse may be symptomatic of persons who use marijuana, but that does not mean that it is the cause or reason for why they find themselves using marijuana. And if we take a look at countries where marijuana has since been legalized, countries such as Canada, countries such as the Netherlands, we would realize that in countries where marijuana is now legal, we actually see a reduction in the use of marijuana among young persons. Why is that? Reason being, they place a concerted effort on educating persons as to the proper use of marijuana and the associated benefits and the safe usages. I feel that we need to shift the discussion not to whether or not we should legalize it, but what are the potential benefits of legalizing it, and what are the drawbacks of having it illegal? Because we don't realize that prohibition is not an effective solution of getting our youth to be able to stop using this. Also, we're seeing that the same countries that our youth want to travel to, whether it's for school, whether it's for development, whether it's for jobs, they may not be able to travel to those countries because they have a criminal record that includes marijuana. But isn't it ironic that you can't travel to the US to go to a university in California, where in California it's practically one of the capitals, the marijuana capitals of the US?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to remind the virtual and listening audience that you can submit your questions to either ANYC member in the audience or via the ANYC Facebook page. We are going into the final question from the ANYC, and then we will be taking your questions. And the question reads, and we will be starting with Mr. Brent Davis. What must be done from a government approach to improve the health and well-being of our general population while preventing the high prevalence of chronic diseases? SDG 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 11, and 13. I will repeat. What must be done from a government approach to improve the health and well-being of our general population while preventing the high prevalence of chronic diseases? SDG 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 11, and 13. You have 1 minute to formulate your response, and then 3 minutes in which to respond to the question.
Thank you. Healthcare is, next to the economy, it's probably the most important question in this election and the most important issue facing Anguilla. One of the first things that I will do will be to commission a study and an inquiry into why we have such high rates of chronic illnesses and other diseases such as cancer. We need to really examine this carefully, because for a small island per capita, we have too much cancer and too much other diseases compared to other countries. My primary focus will be on the whole aspect of holistic healthcare. We need to develop and implement a holistic healthcare plan that encompasses all primary, secondary, and tertiary aspects of healthcare. We need to establish strategic alliances with regional and international hospitals to enable our people to transfer knowledge back and forth between those countries. Immediately, we need to facilitate the development of our hospital and our clinics as centers of excellence through world-class equipment and embracing our people at home and abroad in all aspects of the healthcare industry. We have too many capable Anguillians in the healthcare sector around the world, and they're not given an opportunity. We need to encourage them to come back home to be a part of the healthcare system by giving them incentives the same way that we give to non-Anguillians. We need to give them benefits in terms of custom duties, right? That's one of the aspects. We can give them the travel allowance and the housing allowance, whether they have a home here or not, right? These are things that we can do, but because we have the people, right? So this is a discussion that we can go on forever, and my mission is to get things done in this election. I am not pretending to be the expert on anything. My mission here is to get things done so that 53 years from now we don't be talking about the same thing. We have a lot of capable people in all aspects of the healthcare industry, and we need to embrace each other, right? So this is critical. We need to look at establishing and promoting the herbal sector and our whole traditional remedies to provide lower cost incentives for our people and drugs that we can provide ourselves, building upon the tradition of our grandparents and our and ancestors, our local bushes, etc. Right? We need to commission a study into that. We also need to provide universal health care so that we can provide health care for our elderly in terms of basic blood pressure, diabetes, and sugar tablets, etc. Right? In other countries, our elderly are taken care of. They present a card and they go to the hospital and they're taken care of. They deserve that. It's up to us as the younger ones to take care of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now hear the response from Mrs. Quincia Gumbs-Marie.
So what we can do as a government is to look at three things: what we eat, what we do, and in terms of our lifestyle, and how we go about addressing preventative health care. What we eat is particularly important, and how we aim to address this is through the creation of a Bureau of Standards. This is important because we have to ensure that our agricultural department is involved in the governing of our organic our organic farming practices. This is important because we need to ensure that whatever foods we produce, as we start to focus on food security, that it is organic, that the pesticides used in the process are not harmful to our human health, and we can also ban whatever is unhealthy in our food production. What is also important with the Bureau of Standards is ensuring that we don't have unhealthy foods in our market. Food security and well-being is not only just about having food accessible, but also to ensure that the foods available does not exacerbate the triple burden of malnutrition, which is undernutrition, micronutrient deficiencies, and obesity. So we need to ban whatever that is not healthy. Currently, what we have on our shelves would not be able to be imported in the UK, although we are UK citizens. Preventative healthcare is also very important. When we consider preventative healthcare, it is not just a matter of providing it, but having increased access to it in terms of availability on Anguilla and availability as it relates to price. We know that when we look at the research, it shows that persons will avoid preventative health care when they find that it is too expensive. And similar to justice, healthcare denied is healthcare delayed. We need to ensure that our people have access to actual opportunities to check up on themselves, and not just through having promotions on radio and other forms, but also empowering our people to make the correct decisions for their health. What we do is also important. Green spaces have long been a conversation, a political conversation. We need to partner with with the private sector, who is also interested in the creation of green spaces. An example of that is through ensuring that persons who will give green spaces to improve healthy lifestyles will be the beneficiaries of reduced taxes when they use their own lands to do so. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gumbs-Marie. Now we'll hear the response from Mr. Jose Vanterpool.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Now, there are several approaches that government can take to improving the overall health and well-being of our population as it relates to reducing chronic diseases. First of all, I feel that we need to see more national programs put in place, such as that of the Move Your Body initiative that encourages getting out and getting active. Secondly, we need to put policies in place that supports not only our local farmers and giving them a competitive advantage when compared to the imported markets, but encourage private growers as well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, our farmers have the capacity to provide certain crops, such as cucumbers, tomatoes, and meat quotas necessary for our entire population, but yet these products are still allowed to be imported. We need to make sure that we put safeguards in place for our local farmers once they can ensure quality and quantity consistently that give them the competitive advantage when it comes to growing. We need to also make sure that the persons who want to start their own backyard gardens at home are incentivized to do so and not viewed as competing with our local farmers. I feel like we need to place more of a focus on primary health care, because at the end of the day, it comes down to, are we going to pay for prevention or are we going to pay for the cure? It always works out that paying for the cure is much more expensive. And finally, I feel like we need to set an example for our youth. One way that I feel like we may be able to do so is via introducing planting initiatives to our schools, whereby we can have plots where the students can grow their own food. It takes it to the level of them not only hearing and being educated of how or the importance of doing so, but then being able to see it for themselves, being exposed to how easy it is. And as we encourage them to do this at home, that may be a way of convincing the parents to get involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vanterpool. We will now take the response from Mrs. Annika Webster-Lake.
As a nation, I think it is important for us to consider, and in a government, to consider that their people should be living purposeful lives. A healthy society is a society that's going to thrive. It will continue to survive and thrive. So from a government perspective, how should the government really handle this? My first step would be basic education when it comes to health care. Now, the health authority some years ago, I think they did an initiative when it came to non-communicable diseases, high blood pressure. They had posters up all over telling us, listen, reduce your salt. They had ads on the air. Don't eat too much salt, fish and pigtail, because, you know, those things send your pressure up. Basic education, where you don't take medication with Bush because there's a mixture. You have to educate the people. That's basic, that's bottom line, that's fundamental. Then you have to, too, access to health care, preventative health care, and the cost should not be prohibitive. People cannot afford, and I know sometimes we see at the health authority, the cashier does not have the right to send you to the doctor. If you go to some other doctor's sick, there's a sign that you can't go, they don't have the right to send you to the doctor, you're going to stay home. Health care must be accessible and it must be preventative. You don't want to wait until you're at a terrible stage to go to the doctor when the doctor's going to say to you, there's nothing we can do. So any government must make health care, one, affordable, and they must make health care preventative, where you can do your tests every year. You can get your checks done to see what is wrong with you, so that it's just like going, they tell us, you know, you go to the gynecologist every year to be sure that you're okay. But everybody in the country should be able to go to the doctor every year to get their test, and the cost should not be prohibitive. The third thing, we have gyms in Anguilla. We have Dungeon Gym, we have Styler's Gym, we have Extreme Gym, we have Hammer, we have Alfred, Hilroy Alfred, we have Marissa Ray, Lisa Ray. These persons are out there promoting health, and I am hopeful that they are not paying to bring in equipment to get Anguilla people healthy. So another initiative from the government would be to get these persons, if they're not getting it, let them bring in their equipment with duty-free exemptions, because that is all part of creating a healthy society. And if we're so ridden, and if we're ridden with the high prevalence of chronic diseases, then we have to now start thinking about how do we stop the prevalence of that for the next generation to come. We have to offer medication now to those who are at that stage, and that in itself should not be prohibitive. People should be able to get medical attention for that. But how do we now deal with those who are not at that stage? We have to make sure that people have access to education when it comes to health care, that they have access to health care, the cost is not prohibitive, and those who are out there trying to make a difference, oh, sorry, my time's up.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Webster-Lake. We will now give the candidates 2 minutes to rebut or add further information, starting with Mr. Davis.
Thank you. I just want to add a little bit to what was said about in terms of the diet, educating ourselves on the diet and the way we eat. A lot of things we do out of habit and a lack of understanding, especially for our so-called foods that we love, the pigtail and the pig mouth, the pig feet. Listen to what I'm saying. These are not cultural food. There's nothing good about that, right? These are the rejected parts of all the animals that we were given as slaves. So it's nothing to be proud about and to promote that. What we're doing is we're creating intergenerational illnesses for these very same communicable diseases, the blood pressure, the Daka was singing, for the transfer of these communicable diseases that pass on from grandparent to grandparent. That is why we have, you can have a 16-year-old with the blood pressure, right? So those things are not our culture. We had no choice. The prime cuts of the meat was eaten by the master. So let us get away from these type of things and let us educate ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. We'll now take a rebuttal or further information from Mrs. Gumbs-Marie.
On a point of further information, COVID-19 showed us the importance of having a healthy nation, because we realized that with the coronavirus, persons suffering from non-communicable diseases were especially vulnerable to the impacts of the virus. And because this is a youth debate, I want to focus on youth health and youth nutrition. As a government, we must take the strong stance to address the kind of foods available around our schools. Because healthy eating doesn't happen, or it should not just be the focus on when you're sick or when you have to change your lifestyle. It's important about creating lifestyles and empowering our young persons with the knowledge of how to eat healthy and how to have a healthy relationship with food. Currently, our preventative healthcare budget is $0. And we spent $2.4 million in 2003 treating dialysis for persons suffering kidney failures. We need to encourage water consumption in our schools. We need to monitor and closely regulate the kinds of foods available around our schools, because it's very difficult to find healthy options around our schools. We have pizzas, we have Busters, we have Chubbies, but we don't have options. We don't have carrots, we don't have broccolis, we don't have wheat bread. So it's important to ensure that when we are creating that healthy nation, we are creating healthy and empowered young persons to move forward with healthy relationships with food. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we will take the rebuttal or further information from Mr. Vanterpool.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It's not going to be much of a rebuttal because in this situation, I actually agree with my colleagues on the points that were introduced. I do feel that education will be critical in terms of reducing the high prevalence of chronic diseases. I do agree with my colleague here that we need to address the food sources that are available to our youth that's in their vicinity and educating them about the importance of what they eat. And I agree that the cost of healthcare does need to be addressed. Finally, the only thing that I would like to add is that I believe that we need to put initiatives in place which allow access to testing and, as it's been termed, knowing your numbers. I, for one, when I recently went in last year to get a check for knowing your numbers, I had no idea that there's a number associated with visceral fat. I didn't even know what visceral fat is. So we need to educate our youth as to the importance of having these checks, maybe even implementing these regular checks at an early age, free of cost, so that they get in the habit of tracking these numbers. And getting on top of these numbers early will stop them from getting out of control. And for the persons who find that they're at risk or near to being at risk, I think that that will be that would be one of the most incentivizing manners in terms of encouraging them to do better for their own good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll next hear from Mrs. Webster-Lake.
Yes, one of my colleagues mentioned food security, and I just wanted to speak to food security for a minute. I know that growing, and I started doing this as well in the backyard, growing things. I lost the battle of the corn to the fowls, but I started doing something in the backyard because it's important that we do that. But if we want real food security in Anguilla, though, it's not going to happen overnight. And if we think about it, it requires serious thought, serious planning. We're a decade away from it. If we start tonight, we're about a decade away from real food security. And why are we a decade away from real food security? Because the elephant in the room when it comes to Anguillan food security is drought. And the woolly mammoth is climate change, right there standing behind us. NOAA, you know the National Oceanographic Association, the one that tells us about the hurricanes. They did a study and they pointed out that the Caribbean is evolving into a drought zone. And Anguilla particularly, you know, we're drought-ridden. So food security, how do we manage food security really in Anguilla? I think, and we can't keep depending on our lines to the US, but Dominica has a thriving food economy, but how do we then get a direct link, shipping routes to make sure that we can have access to food? Because if we have drought and we have to address the drought, which means we have to look at the Water Corporation, and the Water Corporation already owes Anglic $300,000 every month just to produce water. Those things are prohibitive. So we have to understand when it comes to food security, if we're going to do it, we're going to have to look at renewable energy, like my colleague also said. We're going to have to go to renewable energy, reverse osmosis. Our reverse osmosis plant costs $2.7 million to get it done. But it's going to drop the cost by 75% if we to produce water. So food security requires that we do all of these things, serious thought, serious consideration, and it will take serious people to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you to all of the candidates for your responses. Tonight, there will only be one question due to the interest of time, so we will now have the first fielded question from the virtual and live audience. The question is, the government of Anguilla's understudy and training and development plan is seemingly defunct. Do you see this initiative as essential? I repeat. The government of Anguilla's understudy and training and development plan is seemingly defunct. Do you see this initiative as essential? We will begin with Mrs. Quincia Gumbs-Marie, and you have 1 minute to formulate a response and 3 minutes to respond to the question. 2 minutes. Your time is up. You may now respond.
Can you repeat the question just?
The question is, the government of Anguilla's understudy and training and development plan is seemingly defunct. Do you see this initiative as essential?
Thank you.
You have 2 minutes to respond.
This initiative is very essential. It is important to send the message to young Anguillians that their investment in their education, especially as it relates to hospitality, will be rewarded. We can't just allow them to continue to be sidelined by persons who don't even know our own economy and the workings of it. And why it is also important is because when we look at foreign direct investment, one of the purposes of foreign direct investment is human resource development and opportunities for our persons. If we have a cap on that opportunity and a cap on that potential, and we leave it to go unchecked, we will only have skilled Anguillians in low positions, and we will be sending the message to every other Anguillian that there is no room for growth, no room for opportunity in our main industry. We have to send the message also very loud and clear that Anguillians also can become the owners of these establishments, not just working in it. And it is also, this question is also a point to toothless policies. We have too many policies with no support structures and no structures in there to ensure that what is in the policies are actually being followed. So when we have it here that we have an apprenticeship program that young Anguillians can take up the managerial positions in hotels, the benefit of that policy is not to just have nice words on a paper, it is to enact it and make opportunities for young Anguillians. And if we're not going to do that, then we don't deserve to be celebrated, because we're only celebrated for words on a paper and not actions that can be felt throughout our economy. Thank you.
Thank you for your response. We will now hear from Mr. Jose Vanterpool, and you have a time of 2 minutes.
Thank you, moderator. To put my answer very short and simply, yes, I do believe that programs such as the understudy program is essential. Reason being, it is a direct way of addressing the issue of work permits and directly channeling our local talent into positions held by those who are here on work permits. Now, I can acknowledge the fact that, or I can understand why someone may refer to the system as defunct. And I do acknowledge that, yes, we need to be able to better police the program. But having worked in the hospitality industry, I've kind of seen a bit of the inside difficulties that's associated with the program. And surprisingly enough, even though we talk about our local talent is not our sideline to persons who come from abroad and work on work permits, I've seen the difficulty sometimes of a director finding someone who is willing to take their position as an understudy. Reason being, a lot of our local talent, sometimes they feel like, oh, they shouldn't have to work as an understudy, or sometimes they feel that taking that position that's currently held by someone on a work permit is too much stress for them. So this goes back to the issue of providing opportunities for our youth to be able to work in industries which they want to work in, as opposed to being channeled into industries such as tourism, where it's the only place that has jobs available. Because if they're passionate about getting involved in the tourism industry, and they will be passionate about their growth, they will be passionate about exploring these opportunities and avenues. So I think one thing that we need to do, aside from policing and punishing delinquency and inaction when it comes to the program, I think the other thing that we need to do is ensure that we're channeling the correct persons who have the drive and the hunger to advance within that field. Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Vanterpool. We will now hear from Ms. Annika Webster-Lake.
Thank you. The understudy program is absolutely essential. The Labor Relations Act came in force in January 2019, I believe. And for the very first time, the understudy program had legal backing, where you could actually enforce the law that if you have a manager who was brought in, an expat manager, then you must have an Anguillian understudy that person. So that gives it teeth, which means it is essential. It is a way to get our Anguillians trained up. That's important. However, there needs to be accountability. There needs someone to be checking on this to be sure that it happens. Now, sometimes we have the issue that people are not trained. But I want to point out to you that a training levy was added to every work permit. 10% is collected on every work permit, whether it's new or it's renewal, every year. And that money is to be used for training. It's called a training levy. And if all people are inadequate and they're not ready, train them from the training levy. That makes perfect sense. So we can't keep saying it. I've seen people bring persons from overseas, claim they are experts when they were really officers overseas, and they came here to manage our people, and they did not have managerial experience. So the understudy program is saying, no, we will not do that anymore. And it is saying that all people will be trained. If you're coming with an expertise, you're not leaving here with it. We're giving you a time frame, whether that's 2 years, 3 years, years, 5 years, but after those years, you have to leave because our managers will take over. So it is absolutely necessary, and we need to police it. We need to hold it accountable, hold the people in the offices accountable to check that it's happening.
Thank you for your response, Ms. Webster-Lake. We will now hear from Mr. Brent Davis, and you have a time of 2 minutes to respond.
Thank you. My mission is to put Anguilla first. And we have been talking forever about the labor laws. And when will it be enforced? What it takes for enforcement and what it takes to guide this country starts with caring. We need caring people at the helm. We can have all the laws that we have, whether they're adequate or inadequate. If we don't have the people who care and who are ready to enforce them, we're not getting anywhere. We now have multinational corporations. Our tourism has shifted. We can no longer go and talk to Ryden or Mr. Rizzuto and those guys. You're dealing with multinational corporations who not even the manager knows who they're working for. So we must be vigilant, and we cannot talk about fancy labor laws and all those type of things. We need to be enforced. They need to be enforced, and we must focus on that. We need to develop the hospitality school, as I said earlier, to train our people so that we know our people are trained and qualified. And when we go down there as a minister, we're not going to talk, right? Because the workers in the hotel industry, they already know that these people are not qualified. But we need ministers to back them up who are not playing. It's not a game, it's the livelihood of our country. So let us train our people, and then let us enforce these laws, because these things are on the books forever. We don't need to put anything else. We need to care, and we need to do what we are paid to do as politicians and as people who work in the labor office, etc. We need to do the right thing for our people and put Anguillians first. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you to all of the candidates for your responses. You will now have 1 minute to refute or to add further information.
Although I had mentioned earlier that I learned that I didn't want to be part of hospitality, one thing I did learn in my courses in university is that people are the gold of the product. And whenever your people are frustrated, you do not have a product. You can have the best beaches, you can have the best structures, but you don't have the best service. And that is what brings people back to our shores year after year. And it is sad when I hear a situational example being used as an adequate reason why Anguillians must be sidelined or not properly represented. Persons not being interested in challenging work permit holders may be a small part of the few, because I've walked the streets of Anguilla with my team, and I've spoken to so many persons in the hospitality sector, and they are fed up. They feel underrepresented and overutilized. They feel manipulated by the system, because they say that these things are put into the codes and celebrated as wins for politicians, but they are not represented and they are not the beneficiaries, because all... Is my time
Thank
up,
you.
or are you just...
Time is
oh. Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Mrs. Gumbs-Marie. We will now move on to Mr. Jose Vanterpool.
Thank you, moderator. I just want to make it clear that situations being put forth may not be a reason for justifying the delinquency, but merely ensuring that all facets of the problem are included in the discussion, because it's a real part of the problem that we'll need to see addressed. Now, during the COVID-19 period, I personally saw several of my coworkers taking the opportunity presented by enrolling in certification courses in hospitality, which were offered online by Florida Atlantic University. I feel that we need to push more certification within all of our industries, but especially within our hospitality industry, as well as education and formal training. I feel that we need to work along with our industry partners to be able to put programs in place which would be able to, for example, an exchange program where our workers would be able to work with other properties around the world, because this will boost their versatility in terms of their set of skills, as well as their overall training and exposure within the hospitality market, better preparing them for the variety of situations which may arise here in Anguilla. I would like to agree with Mr. Davis that the introduction of a hospitality school here in Anguilla is something that I would love to see. I feel that seeing that it's the main pillar of our economy, we need to be pumping out persons who are equipped in the field. Because it's one thing to shadow someone for 6 months, a year. I'm up? Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Mr. Vanterpool. We will now hear from Ms. Annika Webster-Lake, and I'd like to remind you that you have 1 minute to refute or to add further information.
I wanted to add some further information as it relates to the understudy program. How the understudy program works is that the company, the institution, that business, they develop a program for that employee. They do it over a period of years, and by the end of that program, that employee should be able to take over that managerial position. It is their responsibility to train that employee up to the position. That's how the understudy program works. From my platform, the last meeting I had in Island Harbor, I made a statement because I was very aware that there were expat managers at work while their understudies were, the managers were at home sitting down. And I asked the question very simply, how is it that you can have work permit holders working, getting full pay, and the understudies are at home? They should be using this time to train. They should be training them up, reskilling, upskilling. We now have an understudy program with teeth, and we need to use it for our advantage and get our Anguilla managers trained up to the point where they take over. Thank you.
Thank you for your response, Ms. Webster-Lake. We will now hear from Mr. Brent Davis.
Thank you. I just want to add that we have been talking for too long. One of the things that we have to do, whether I'm there or not, or that we should do, is to implement what I call the Anguilla Diaspora Directory. We cannot think of ourselves as just the Anguillans who live here. We have Anguillans and Anguillan descendants all across this world that are capable of coming back home. We have to give them incentives to come back. And when we do that, we will know exactly what skill sets we have for all aspects of this society, and then we will demand from the investors that, hey, you can bring your main financial person or one other person that you trust, because it's your money, you're managing your money, but everyone else after that, right down to the cleaner on the street, from the accountant down, should be Anguillans and people of Anguillan descent. That is how you build a nation, and that's what I'm here to do, right? We have people all over this planet that are capable of running all aspects of Anguilla's life, and we need to involve them. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the candidates. We now move into our closing statements. We will be starting with Mr. Jose Vanterpool. You have 3 minutes to deliver your closing statements, and you can start now.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Now, I was going to prepare a closing statement, but I felt that it's a week before elections. I would prefer just to speak directly to you, the people of Anguilla. Now, I sit here before you, an island-wide candidate for the Anguilla United Front. I also sit here as the youngest candidate in this race. I don't believe that age is a factor which determines how you're able to contribute, and that's exactly why I want to come back to contribute. I am a product of Anguilla. I have considered myself blessed for the opportunities that I've had in life, but I acknowledge that a lot of these opportunities are because of you, the people of Anguilla. I was awarded the Island Scholarship back in 2014. I was able to travel to the UK, attend my master's in computer science with first-class honors at the University of Bristol. And I was able to travel around the world during that period because, again, it was you, the people of Anguilla, who gave me that opportunity to be able to go to school. Now, in my travels and in my studies, I believe that I've been equipped with a set of skills that make me effectively able to contribute here in Anguilla. I got an opportunity to work in the UK following my graduation, but I turned it down. Reason being, it's you, the people of Anguilla, who sent me to school. I made the promise that I would come back and contribute once I do so, and I want to make good on my promise. So I feel that the best way that I can contribute is by offering myself to you, the people of Anguilla, as a candidate in this general election. With my training in computer science, I feel like I have the set of skills that will find itself conducive towards diversifying our economy into the technology space. I am passionate about areas such as renewable energy, sustainable development, as well as the overall empowerment and opportunities for the people of Anguilla. The same opportunities that I was afforded, I want to see afforded to more youth on our island, and that is my intention to do so. I am running not by myself, but I'm running as part of a team, a diverse team, a team that has persons from experience and perspectives from all walks of life. And I feel that that diversity is one of the aspects that make our team, the Anguilla United Front, the best team to take Anguilla forward following the 2020 general elections. Now, while I know that I have several initiatives in place that I would like to see done, and all of the ideas and innovations in the world, I know that I cannot do it alone, and I know that I will need guidance. And that's why I am happy to be running with an experienced team that can guide me in the way forward, and I look forward to learning from our experienced politicians such as the Honorable Mr. Victor Franklin Banks and Evans McNeil Rogers in the next 5 years, where my introduction to politics is their last way out. What I want to say going out is, the people of Anguilla, thank you for everything you've done for me. I offer myself to you as your humble servant, and if you, the people, should see it fit to elect me and my team into office come June 26th and June 29th, I promise you that I will have honesty, I will have integrity, and I will work to the best, my utmost best, to develop our little island, Anguilla. Thank you.
We'll now have the closing statement from Mrs. Annika Webster-Lake.
Let me first thank you all for this opportunity. Let me thank my colleagues in the political arena for a very cordial, insightful, exciting debate. Thank you. To you, the audience, those who are present and those who are listening to us, thank you. My closing statement. On Sunday evening, that's last evening, we were sitting and chatting at home, and my son came to me and he said, "Mom, what time are you going to the debate tomorrow?" I said, "Just before it starts." And he said, "Well, we need to leave early because we have to get a seat." I didn't bother. I went back to doing my things. And then 30 seconds later, he came back and said, "So what do we wear? And where do we sit?" I said, "Matter-of-factly, you will wear clothes and you will sit in a chair." To which he responded, "On which side? The blue side or the yellow side?" He's 10, and he recognizes that we are divided by colors and sides, and he thinks that there is no place for persons who aren't in those colors. And that is a direct result of the system of government we have been handed down and that we have been made to believe is the only way for us. A direct result of how party politics divides us. I very quickly said to him that there is only one Anguilla, not a blue Anguilla, not a yellow Anguilla, not a whatever color Anguilla. We are all one Anguilla. And all of us should be rooting for Anguilla to come out victorious. All of us should be clapping and shouting to get the best possible representation in the house, your house, the people's house. Our children or young people are paying attention and they feel there is no room for them in a color-coded Anguilla, when the truth is Anguilla belongs to them. They are our future. And if we listen to our young people, they want a unified, resilient, and robust Anguilla where their voices are heard. I urge all of us on June 26th and June 29th to vote for Anguilla. For heaven's sake, I am asking you all to please vote for Anguilla. And a vote for the rock is a vote for the rock, Anguilla. Thank you again for the opportunity to be part of this debate. Good night. God bless you.
Thank you very much. We now take the closing statement from Mr. Brent Davis.
Fellow Anguillians, our country is at a critical crossroads in our development and evolution as a nation and as a people. A time in which we need all the talents and gifts, skills, expertise, and experiences of all Anguillians at home and abroad. Now more than ever, we need bold and innovative leadership to create and unite a country in pursuit of a common destiny. A destiny that will make Anguilla a center of global excellence in all aspects of human life. A destiny in which all Anguillians are proud to call this blessed rock home. A destiny in which people all over the world will see us as a model for sustainable social and economic development. Fellow Anguillians, we can do it. We were born with innate leadership qualities that the Most High endowed us with. And it is time that we manifest these gifts to the rest of the world. As we say, Anguilla to the world. We can only achieve this excellence by electing caring and visionary leadership who have passion and compassion for all Anguillians, not just a select few. We can soar to great heights as a people. I believe in you. I believe in us. I understand, I believe, and I know that together we can make a big difference in this world. Fellow Anguillians, I come here before you tonight scarred and bruised with the trials and experiences of life on Anguilla and on this earth. I also come before you glowing and giving praise for the joys and beauties of Anguilla and this world. Fellow Anguillians, I come to you well seasoned with the pains and joy of this blessed country. I have seen this land as it was from the greatness to our worst. My people of Anguilla, it is time that we embrace caring and compassionate leadership. My good people, this is real life. This is not a fantasy that we are living. We need people who truly understand life. Life is not about what we learn on the internet. You cannot truly learn life from your parents. You can only truly learn life from living it. You cannot learn it from a book. It is not a game. We need people in Anguilla who have been tried and proven and who are ready to embrace the young, the old, and the all in between. We are living in serious times, perilous times. We are at war, fellow Anguillians. We are at war with forces seen and forces unseen. Therefore, in times of war, we must be ready to fight. We must be armed with leaders who possess knowledge and understanding to take this country forward. And I ask you to make Brent Davis one of your 11 candidates in the next coming election. Vote for the key. Thank you, and may God bless Anguilla.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. We'll now take the closing statement from Mrs. Quincia Gumbs-Marie.
Anguilla, I am indeed grateful to the attending, listening, and viewing audience for your attentiveness this evening. I have asked every Anguillian across the political divide to see me as a candidate that has a real plan of action and one that truly cares about delivering tangibles for the people of Anguilla, because I intend to ask the right questions, have the right conversations, include the right stakeholders, and listen to the right ideas that will move us forward as a collective. We are not going to be able to meet the requirements of this moment by recycling the same arguments, policies, and politicians that have dominated the Anguillian political landscape for as long as I have been alive. We have to summon the courage to walk away from the past and do something different. This is our shot. This is why I am running for public office. Conventional politics will not solve our problems because conventional politics is part of the problem. We, the people of Anguilla, must rise up and do what is best and create a new possibility and say no to what we do not want and yes to what we know can be true. Without this, the change we so desire will not be possible. Without this, the new age of politics we wish to see will only be a pipe dream. Continuity will not solve our problems because the politics of accepting that things will always be as they are is the reason why we are stuck with the dated solutions to our modern problems. So on June 26th and 29th, you will be given 5 chances to change your present circumstances. I am asking you to make me, Quincia Gumbs-Marie, along with my running mates in the Anguilla Progressive Movement, running under the symbol the boat, give us the opportunity to govern and to offer a difference and a change. Because change can't wait. God bless you, Anguilla.
Thank you to our candidates. And thank you to the audience for being such a wonderful audience this evening. That is the end of our debates. Have a wonderful evening. God bless you.
Watch me. Land of the sea and the sun. Carnival is a time when a lot of people come down to line. All the natives come back home, come down to celebrate and have fun with their own. All the activities involved, the preparations we were making all year long, the boosting from the radio to let the people know Carnival is for sure. August Monday the start, the fun and the tongue is the hottest town. Old dress going, people are wrong, everybody just getting down. August Thursday the grand finale, the people that's really party. Everybody who don't miss way, shouting out to railway. Everybody who don't miss way, shouting out to railway. On the day of the parade.